All right, we've got breaking 49ers news, and it is not the news that they wanted to hear. According to Jordan Schultz, Brandon Aiyuk suffered a season-ending knee injury on Sunday. Tests confirmed. So the 49ers feared an ACL tear yesterday based on the test that the trainers can do just with their hands, feeling the knee. And then the MRI was scheduled for today. And according to Jordan Schultz, the MRI results are back, and it is a season-ending knee injury. I can assume that it's an ACL. I won't firmly report that until we have the firm word. Kyle Shanahan is set to speak in about 2 hours. So at that point, we'll know the full details. You know, one important detail about this is everything else intact in Brandon Aiyuk's knee? Because if it's just a clean ACL, there's a solid chance that he'll be back for the start of next season. But if it's not a clean ACL, if there's other damage in the knee, then this could be a more prolonged recovery. So this is important. Obviously, the 49ers very recently made a big investment in Brandon Aiyuk at, on average, $30 million a season. They hadn't gotten much return on that investment to start this season. I don't think Aiyuk was in top form by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, the numbers have been significantly worse, and I'm talking normal numbers and advanced numbers over the first 7 weeks of this season. But now he's hurt, and now the worries about all of the production and all that are going to go on the back burner. Now the worry is about Brandon Aiyuk's rehab and about how the 49ers are going to make up for losing who was their number one receiver last season. So taking a look at the 49ers roster here, the receiver room is at the top of the screen. Brandon Aiyuk is going to be shaded in pink here for an injury. We could probably even remove him now from the 53 since he's going to be headed to injured reserve. Why don't I do that? Why don't we just take Brandon Aiyuk off just so we could visualize this? The plan is for Jauan Jennings to come back from his hip injury this week. Deebo Samuel is currently sick, so we can also list him in a shaded color here. I think that, you know, you look at the wide receiver one spot, which is the X receiver spot. The 49ers might trade for somebody. It wouldn't shock me if they did. They have before for that X spot with Emmanuel Sanders in 2019. But Jauan Jennings, I think he's a better separator, especially this season. He's been a better separator than Brandon Aiyuk. Why can't he play that X spot? Samuel's definitely not going to play the X. Deebo Samuel. He's a bulldozer. He's good at that Z. He's a specialty weapon for the 49ers. But I'm going to go ahead and slot Jauan Jennings into the X receiver spot for now. And then you can see it's Jennings at the X, Samuel at the Z. Who plays that F spot, the slot spot, the third wide receiver spot for the 49ers? At this point, I think you would have to say that Jacob Cowing is in the lead to grab that, because, I mean, Cowing had a productive game yesterday when the 49ers needed him to have a productive game yesterday. He caught the big 44-yard deep pass from Brock Purdy on the double move. That was sweet, but they also threw the little tunnel screen to Jacob Cowing. He showed off his quickness there. I noticed at one point in the red zone yesterday, before he scored the touchdown, this was Brock Purdy's rushing touchdown, he went for Jacob Cowing in the red zone. That was his first read. So I think Cowing has ascended the pecking order. Of course, this guy right here is a huge part of the 49ers' future plans and is going to have to be a huge part of what San Francisco does this year, and that is Ricky Pearsall. I wrote about that after the game yesterday. We'll talk about it a little bit more coming up. But Ricky, at this point, you just can't expect as much from him as somebody like Jacob Cowing, who's been in practice for a few weeks. So, you know, what I'll do is I need to update the roster to include Ricky Pearsall's name. We moved Jacob Cowing into a starting spot, and now we'll put Ricky Pearsall officially onto the 53 behind him. The other two receivers that you have are Chris Conley and Ronnie Bell. I could see the 49ers aiming to minimize disruption and starting Chris Conley while keeping Jauan Jennings in that wide receiver 3 spot. So as long as you think that Jacob Cowing isn't ready for a starting role, which might be how the 49ers feel right now, they can keep Jennings at the F spot and have Conley take over the X. And, they're going to run different permutations and variations of their offense, obviously, because Jennings' snap count should go through the roof at this point with no Brandon Aiyuk. But there's several different ways the 49ers can mix and match the receiving room. With Ricky Pearsall, the reason they drafted him in the first round is they see him as somebody that can adaptably take all the different positions. Your X has to be able to beat man coverage, has to have the size to block, and your F receiver that has to have a lot of short area quickness. The X typically has to have outside speed. The F has to have the separation ability to get open and the toughness to get open on the inside. They see a little bit of both with Ricky Pearsall. Pearsall was 6'1", 190 coming out of college. Brandon Aiyuk is about 210 now. Brandon Aiyuk has added some muscle ever since his days at Arizona State. So Pearsall not quite as big, might not be able to execute the same type of blocking toughness that Brandon Aiyuk was able to do at that X spot on the outside, which is why I think they might really like Jawan Jennings there. The good news for the 49ers is that everybody is cross-trained at all of these receiver positions. So they definitely do still have the depth to stay afloat. On top of that, and we have to mention this, and, it is too bad that the 49ers lost somebody who was one of the best receivers in football last season, in Brandon Aiyuk, but he hadn't been playing at that level this year. The number that first really started sticking out to me was, as far as an advanced metric went, was the average separation, which is average separation at the time of the catch. So obviously you want a larger sample because it's not going to be including footballs that are not thrown Brandon Ayuk's way. But he had been so consistent in terms of average separation over the first 4 years of his career. In 2020 as a rookie, it was 2.8 for Brandon Aiyuk. 2.8 yards. In 2021, it was 2.9 yards. In 2022, it was 2.9 yards. In 2023, it was 2.9 yards. Suddenly, in 2024, through the first 7 games, it fell a half yard to 2.4 yards. So, I mean, we could take that for what it's worth, but I could also look at some other Brandon Aiyuk stats, and everything else was down this year. Obviously, if you look at the raw numbers, 25 catches, 374 yards, that wasn't a great pace for Brandon Aiyuk to start the season, but catch percentage, every single season prior to this one, it had gotten better. So 62.5% in 2020, 66.7% in 2021, 68.4% in 2022, up to 71.4% in 2023. That plummeted down to 53% this past season for Brandon Aiyuk. So catch percentage way down. Yards per target down from 12.8 to 8.0. That's a huge reduction. I mentioned the raw receiving totals, and the yards per reception down from 17.9 to 15, but only 25 catches for 374 yards. And we're almost halfway through the season. He definitely wasn't on pace for another 1,000-yard season, which he'd done in 2022 and 2023. So obviously we hadn't been seeing the same Brandon Aiyuk as we had in the past. Now, there's a fair argument to be made that he was close to turning the corner. He had the 100-plus yard game a couple weeks ago against the Arizona Cardinals. He made a couple big catches against the Seahawks. The catch on which he did get hurt yesterday against the Kansas City Chiefs was a big catch as the 49ers were moving into the red zone, and that's the one that got his knee. So the talent was still undeniably there for Brandon Aiyuk, and we would see it in spurts, but we definitely didn't see it as consistently as last year when I would show you guys all of those XY charts, and Brandon Aiyuk was way up on the upper right. I mean, he was really playing at a super efficient level, and that's what earned the contract with the 49ers. There was a ton of consternation over that contract. It took a long time to get done. He reportedly signed the same deal that had been on the table for 3 weeks. So he missed a lot of training camp. And I think that resulted in the poor form that we saw to start this season. Now we see the injury in October. And you obviously can't say that those two things are linked. That was a bad break. That was a shot to the knee that probably would have created an issue for Brandon Aiyuk, whether or not he had been at training camp. But I'm talking about the cumulative impact on the 49ers team and on their offense. Losing Brandon Aiyuk the way that he was playing last year would have been a cataclysmic blow to the 49ers. The performance that they were getting this year, they can pick up the slack from what they were getting this year. They're still decently efficient offensively. I know yesterday was a rotten game for the 49ers, but they're still decently efficient on the aggregate offensively. And that was even with Brandon Aiyuk playing at far below the level that they had seen from him in prior seasons. So how the 49ers going to pick up the slack? Well, this is where we go to my article up on the San Francisco Standard. I already put his picture up on the screen, but we might as well do it again. That is Ricky Pearsall, who may be the next man up. I would say right now, Jacob Cowing might be somebody who gets a few more snaps until Pearsall is fully integrated into the offense. He's only been back for about a week, but Ricky spoke for the first time publicly to the media on the record since he was shot in the chest on August 31st. And it's some of the harrowing details. I mean, he broke down into tears, he said, when John Lynch first visited his hospital room at San Francisco General. That's all up in the story, up on the Standard, because he wanted to play so bad. And he'd just gotten shot in the chest. Finally, the x-rays and the CAT scans came back, and they confirmed that this was not a life-threatening situation for Ricky Pearsall. So John Lynch was involved, what was allowed up into the hospital room. And Ricky said that when he saw John Lynch, he was overcome with emotion because he realized that he probably wasn't going to be able to play week 1 against the Jets. And he asked the 49ers, I want to play week 1 against the Jets. It wasn't realistic. He was just talking at that point. That wasn't something that actually was going to happen. But he said that that's when all the emotions got up to him. That's when he broke down. That's when he was crying in the hospital room. And it really shows you what kind of gamer this guy is. You know, the dog in Ricky Pearsall. I think George Kittle said that he's got some dog in him yesterday, a lot of dog in him. And he said the same thing about Jacob Cowing. The 49ers are going to need both of these rookies to pick up some of the slack left behind with this injury to Brandon Aiyuk. Again, those of you just joining, Jordan Schultz has reported that Brandon Aiyuk is done for the season with a knee injury. Tests have confirmed that. We can speculate that it is an ACL tear since the 49ers yesterday were fearing an ACL tear following the rudimentary tests on Brandon Aiyuk's knee. But according to the tests that are coming out today, and that's via Jordan Schultz, those would be MRIs. It is indeed a season ender, which would probably be an ACL tear for Brandon Aiyuk. The other information we need is, how are the other ligaments? Is the MCL intact, for example? Because the LCL, the MCL, and the ACL, those are the 3 ligaments in the knee. If there's other damage to the knee, the recovery process can take longer for Brandon Aiyuk. And that's obviously something that no party wants here. Everybody wants Brandon Aiyuk to be back and at full speed to begin next season. The ACL, especially if it's a clean ACL tear, is not the same devastating injury that it was a few decades ago. It's one that guys can return from at full speed, especially a guy like Brandon Aiyuk, who's still in his mid to, approaching his late 20s, but not quite there yet. He's 26, 27 years old. So he's at the age where an ACL tear is something that will keep him out this season, but should not impact his career down the line if the recovery does go according to plan. And with these professional athletes and a lot of these 49ers who have gotten ACL tears, they've gone down to LA. Neil Elatrosh is the ACL specialist, renowned ACL specialist. These guys are able to come back at full strength. We saw Nick Bosa return and turn into the defensive player of the year following his ACL tear in 2020. But Aiyuk is, according to Schultz, done for the season, and the 49ers need to find a way to replace him. And that's what I did write about yesterday on the San Francisco Standard. Again, in this article, some truly harrowing details. By the way, if you go to the link, it's in the description. You can get the breaking news straight to your inbox. You can sign up for that newsletter down there. There's another spot you could sign up where you can get all these articles about the 49ers that I write. And Tim Kawakami writes. I want to take you through what both George Kittle said and Ricky Pearsall said. First, the Kittle quote is a good one regarding the 49ers and having to make up for this loss of Brandon Aiyuk. He said, Kyle's going to have to scheme some stuff up. The nice thing is we still have Juwan Jennings, me, Kyle Juszczyk, Debo. We still have guys all over our rosters that can still make plays. Cowing ran that awesome curl pump today. He and Pearsall are going to be forced to grow up really fast. It's going to be on us as veterans in the system to help them along and make sure they're ready to play in these football games. Toward the end of the article, Kittle then said, football is a land of opportunity. Injuries happen, stuff happens, expletive things happen. Who's going to step up, rise to the occasion, and take advantage of the opportunity? We have a lot of young players. It's up to our vets to pull them along, whether they're ready for them or not. Following his first career action, is Pearsall ready for that? I feel like I could play another game right now, Pearsall said with a smile. And then I write, if they're to properly rebound from another loss at the hands of their tormentors from Kansas City, the 49ers will need that and much more from their first-round pick moving forward. So, speaking of the first-round pick and Pearsall, that's where we go to the hospital scene. He said that when John Lynch entered his room at San Francisco General, he broke down into tears just because it hit a little different. Knowing that I wasn't going to be able to play week one, I was looking forward to the opportunity. So just the way it went down made me a little emotional seeing him there. That's when it all hit. And this is just crazy stuff. My first thoughts, said Ricky Pearsall, was I going to be alive or not? Once I knew I was going to be okay and be able to live, my thoughts were, was I going to be able to play football now? Once I got that answer, a light grew inside of me. So the light of hope grew inside Ricky Pearsall over the course of the past few weeks. He was finally able to make it back. He said that there actually was, although the bullet went through and through, there was still a lot of scar tissue buildup. So it didn't hit any vital organs, but the scar tissue buildup from the bullet wound prevented Ricky Pearsall from raising his arm fully above his head. You want full range of motion as a receiver, which is why it took a few weeks for him to be ready to come back. When he finally got that range of motion back, the 49ers opened his practice window, and then exactly 49 days after the August 31st shooting, they activated him to the 53-man roster. So now it's a matter of Ricky Pearsall acclimating. They drafted him for this reason, to have short-term depth in the receiving room at all the receiving spots, and they're going to need that now with Brandon Aiyuk out, but he's going to have to get his feet wet very quickly. As George Kittle said, whether those rookies are ready or not, it's our job as veterans to get them ready, to get into the flow. And the 49ers drafted a second receiver, and that was Jacob Cowing. And now I think those strategies in the offseason should make sense to everybody, because you can never count on full health at any position group for a full NFL season. You do hope to avoid the worst, but according to reports, the 49ers have not avoided the worst with Brandon Aiyuk. He will be done for the season. This episode of the Lombardi Lounge is sponsored by BetterHelp. October is a season for wearing masks and costumes, but some of us feel like we wear a mask and hide more often than we want to at work, in social settings, and around our family. Therapy can help you learn to accept all parts of yourself so you can take off the masks, because masks should be for Halloween fun, not for our emotions. And I know emotions can run high during football season, especially now during the fall with a whole lot of other stuff going on. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Overcome your fears with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/Lombardi Lounge today to get 10% off your first month. That's betterhelp.com/Lombardi Lounge. The piece up on the Standard quotes Kyle Shanahan at the very start. We didn't do anything really good on offense. We got our ass kicked today. This is blunt as Shanahan has ever been, but that is exactly a summary of what happened to the 49ers. They were beaten in every single facet of offensive play in that game. I talked about it a little bit earlier. We did a video on what the 49ers have to fix to turn the page and turn it around, similar to how they did in 2021 and 2022. And I started with the fact that Kansas City did not buy the play action fake that the 49ers ran on the second drive of the game. First play, second drive of the game. Purdy should have never thrown that ball to Justin Reed. That was an ugly, ugly interception intended for George Kittle. But what struck me is how the Chiefs stayed at home on the play after the 49ers had run 3 times in the first drive. So Kansas City was obviously not respecting the 49ers run game. They thought that they'd be able to take it out just playing their base defense and not gambling at all early on against the run. And when that happens, that's a sign that your balance isn't where it needs to be, because if you're balanced as an offense, you're going to keep the defense off balance. And the 49ers definitely weren't able to do that. It's going to be that much harder to keep defenses off balance without an experienced receiver like Brandon Aiyuk on the outside. But again, the 49ers were not firing at full cylinders to begin with, especially Brandon Aiyuk, who was struggling to start this 2024 season. So I think that making up for his production and his impact will be a challenge, but it won't be the impossible one that it was last season. One thing that people really underrate Brandon Aiyuk with, I think, and they underrate a lot of 49ers receivers with this, is his run blocking ability on the outside. For a team that is struggling to generate the rushing efficiency that is needed to succeed, every single body that you lose that's a positive blocker that is strong enough to muscle up on the outside and create some of those lanes on the perimeter, every single loss in that regard is a significant one. That's one thing that if I'm the 49ers, I would worry about significantly right now when replacing Brandon Aiyuk with Jacob Cowing or Ricky Pearsall. I know it's not going to be a swap replacement. It's not going to be like those guys are stepping right into the X receiver spot. But what I would worry is that you're losing that blocking presence at the X with Brandon Aiyuk. And when that happens, how much more is your run game going to be damaged? And Chris Conley, by the way, is a really good run blocker. So if the 49ers just want to keep that line moving at the X receiver position, I think that's the path they take. I think Chris Conley is the easy substitution there. But if they really want to play upside and Jacob Cowing starts impressing them, you could have Jawan Jennings move to the X. Now, again, it is possible that this team feels they need another veteran presence to raise the ceiling of the room, because they certainly benefited from top-level wide receiver play with Brandon Aiyuk last season. And that's where a potential trade would happen. It's too bad that Davante Adams already got traded this past week. Now, also, Davante Adams was traded from the Raiders, and I don't know if Mark Davis is ever going to be willing to do business with the San Francisco 49ers for that type of player on the trade market. Amari Cooper already traded. That was somebody the 49ers were interested in. Trading Aiyuk for back before the contract was finalized. Now, what's somebody like DeAndre Hopkins and the Tennessee Titans, they might be open to doing business since they're absolutely terrible this year. The Titans, I believe, only have 1 win. They only beat the Skylar Thompson Miami Dolphins. So maybe that's there, but the 49ers are not a team that has shied away from adding at this X receiver position via the trade market in the past. So I think it is something that we do need to keep our eye out for. Mike texts me Kendrick Bourne. Yeah, I mean, and Kendrick Bourne is probably somebody that it could be had for a lesser price. Coming off the ACL tear, he's not going to be the same caliber of receiver as a DeAndre Hopkins, even at an advanced age. I do know that they have a relationship with the Titans front office, thanks to Rand Carthon. And obviously they were talking to the New England Patriots, and there's some rumors that Bourne might have been involved back in the Brandon Aiyuk contract discussions, negotiations. That whole standoff, that mess featured some trade talks with the Browns for Amari Cooper and maybe some with the Patriots that involved Kendrick Bourne, who would be a familiar face for San Francisco. But this is what the receiver position looks like right now. The 49ers are going to balance the risk and reward of any potential move they can make. The trade deadline is on November 5th. And we have news now from Ian Rappaport. This is not good for the 49ers, and this is not good for Brandon Aiyuk. This is from Rappaport. Brandon Aiyuk does, in fact, have a torn ACL and MCL. There may be other damage. His season is over with a long road back for 2025. This is what Coach Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco believed following the game. So I opened this up by saying that it's probably a torn ACL based on the Jordan Schultz report, but the 49ers would hold their breath that it wasn't any more than that. Well, now Ian Rappaport has said it's both the ACL and the MCL with other potential damage for Brandon Aiyuk, which is the worst possible news that the 49ers could get. So that's rough because that definitely puts Aiyuk's availability for the start of 2025 in jeopardy. We're going to hear from Kyle Shanahan on this in about an hour and a half. So at that point, we'll reconvene. But this whole show dedicated, obviously, to the Brandon Aiyuk injury and how the 49ers might be able to fill in for him. There is less slack to pick up this season than there would have been last season. That's for sure. But there still is a lot of slack to pick up. And now the concerns for San Francisco and for Brandon Aiyuk stretch out into 2025 as well, since this injury extends beyond the ACL. The MCL also torn, and there's a possibility of other damage, according to Ian Rappaport. But the 49ers have to pick up the pieces and move forward now. They've got the Dallas Cowboys coming in on Sunday. San Francisco is 3-4. This is where they were 2 seasons ago, coming off a loss to Kansas City. They were at 3-4, and they had a game against the team of whom they had a number, right? That was the Los Angeles Rams, and they were able to turn it around. The season prior to that, the 49ers were 3-5, and they turned it around against the Rams as well. So the 49ers have to look at this next challenge against the Cowboys as a turnaround effort, similar to their Rams turnaround efforts of 2021 and 2022. They need to get back to the low-risk, high-reward basis that we saw from the Kansas City Chiefs yesterday and we've seen from the 49ers in the past. And that's going to take sharper execution, and it's also going to take better offensive line play. The whole team is going to have to lift itself. Brock Purdy's, fewer drops. Brock Purdy needs to make better throws. Kyle Shanahan's going to have to call better plays. And they're going to have to find a way to shield the offensive line from what it does worst and emphasize what it does the best. That's the formula moving forward for the 49ers as they try to move on and enter life without Brandon Aiyuk, who's suffered a severe knee injury, and I'm sure to have more on that moving forward. We'll talk to everybody soon.